welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Syria's army declares ceasefire in Aleppo's Sheikh Maqsood area, saying captured SDF fighters will be taken to Tabqa. Iran's exiled crown prince is seeing calls to return amid protests against Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. US President Donald Trump hosts nearly 24 of world's top oil and gas executives after meeting military action in Hezbollah. US claims Iran deployed Hezbollah terrorists and Iraqi militants to suppress peace protests in the country. India and the European Union are accelerating free trade agreement talks, aiming for a balanced deal to protect farmers and MSMEs. North Korea accuses South Korea of flying drones into its airspace, warning of consequences, while Seoul denies charges. Simbox racket linked with China, Cambodia and Pakistan busted, rupees 100 crore fraud being probed. Indonesia has temporarily blocked access to Elon Musk's Grok AI over concerns it enabled non-consensual pornographic deepfakes, citing risks to women and children and summoning X for clarification. Right, viewers, we now start with the news on Venezuela and Cuba. Now, US intelligence is delivering a stark assessment of Cuba's economy, but it stopped short of predicting a government collapse. According to reports, CIA findings say key sectors including energy, agriculture and tourism are under severe strain. Frequent blackouts, trade sanctions and deep shortages are hitting daily life. The situation could worsen as Cuba faces a sharp drop in oil supplies from Venezuela, its top energy provider for decades. That reality contrasts with President Donald Trump's claim that Cuba is now ready to fall following recent US action in Venezuela. According to the assessments, the economy is in a very poor shape. Intelligence officials say economic pain alone may not trigger political change, especially as younger Cubans continue to leave the island. I request Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, who is a former diplomat, to join me in this discussion. Ambassador, thanks very much for joining us in this discussion. What's your assessment of the situation? What is next for Cuba?
Thank you for having me. I think there's the direct fallout of change of regime in Venezuela, and the political orientation seemed to have shifted away from Cuba, which was a very strong partner, both economic, political, and security-wise, of Venezuela during Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro's times. It remains to be seen whether the successor regime headed by Delcy Rodriguez would continue to patronize bilateral ties with Cuba the same way as the preceding two had done. During the previous two regimes, on average, Cuba got around 35,000 barrels per day of crude from Venezuela, free of cost, and in return, there were barter deals of various kind, including weapons, security, pharmaceuticals, as well as agricultural produce. So the two countries benefited from it in a bilateral way. Mr. Trump, if he's able to run Venezuela as he claims to do, might not like this relationship to continue, much as he would also like Venezuela to steer away from Beijing and Moscow, as well as Tehran. Uh, Let us see how does it go, but this would have serious repercussions on both sides. Venezuela's loss of various goods and services from Cuba can probably be replaced easily by United States and other friendly countries in the new ecosystem. But Cuba, being isolated, uh, would have difficulty in getting uh, the, 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 the substitutes. Perhaps countries such as Brazil or Mexico might chip in, but they would have to watch over their shoulders about Uncle Sam's reaction to uh, bailing out Cuban economy.
Should they brace for more hardships now?
I think that is a safe conclusion. But Cubans are used to hardships. They have been under embargo from United States for close to 70 years, or if not more. And barring few years during which relations between Cuba and United States improved, diplomatic ties were established, etc., and trade links and consular links were on. Cuba has been put into some kind of ostracization by United States. Uh, so Cubans are used to the various straitjackets that United States has fitted them with. They would, however, need their usual innovation, their usual uh, 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 possible sort of ties with other countries, including Russia, China, Iran, and others, to get by. And they have very strong sense of self-dependence. And I think Cuba has innovated. Cuba has also become more liberal, moving away from Fidel Castro's communist brand. It allows people to have their own private enterprises. Besides, Cuban immigrants in Florida and elsewhere, some of them are willing to chip in and send money, remittances, etc., to their family members in Cuba. So all that would help, but it's safe to predict that there will be some economic consequences of Venezuela fallout.
How does this affect the supply chains, particularly of oil to Cuba?
That's a big question, but Cuba is uh, Cuba would have to resort to all sort of possibilities. Cuba, as you know, is a big producer of sugarcane, and from sugarcane, it's easy to get ethanol, as India itself has been doing, Brazil has been doing. So that may save the day uh, for shifting from oil and gas economy to ethanol economy. But it'll take time, it'll require efforts. And having been used to cheap or free oil from Venezuela for more than 2.5 decades, I think it'll be a considerable effort to wean away from that to something as ethanol would suggest it to be. But shifts are likely, and if you and economic minders in Havana would be looking at all sort of possibilities.
All right. Thanks very much, Ambassador, for joining me in this discussion and helping us with your assessment. Moving ahead now, viewers. Iraq's oil minister has stated that talks were ongoing with US major Chevron regarding the Lukoil integrated operated West Kurna to field, the Russian company's largest foreign asset. This comes as it was earlier reported that Iraq's cabinet had approved plans to nationalize operations at the West Kurna 2 field. According to reports, state-run Basra Oil Company is to take over the oil field's operations for 12 months. The field accounts for about 0.5% of global oil supply and 9% of output in Iraq, OPEC's second largest producer after Saudi Arabia. Chevron and ExxonMobil are among potential bidders for Lukoil's overseas assets following US sanctions on the Russian oil producer. I request Professor Rohan Gunratna to join me in this discussion with his comments. Thank you, Professor, for joining me. Please do go ahead.
What we are seeing is that the Russian and the Iranian oil that is sanctioned has been transported across to India and China. And also the Venezuelan oil has been also transported across. So the Americans have taken a very tough position, even to seize most recently a Russian flagged ship. So with Trump's volatile foreign policy, we have seen a number of interventions, both at sea and on land, to advance American interests. The Americans are most concerned about the Western Hemisphere. They have clearly stated that it is their sphere of influence. And Trump himself is pursuing something called the Monroe Doctrine. So an extension of that doctrine is to advance American interests assertively and aggressively, both in the Western Hemisphere and beyond. And oil and gas is going to be one of the key areas where the US intends to be most intense in advancing their interests.
Professor Gunratna, let's also discuss about the oil reserves of Venezuela that the US has now access to, because oil firms are now saying that the country is largely uninvestable. In the backdrop of this, the Chevron has moved ahead to Iraq. Do you think Trump will be able to inspire confidence in the American oil giants to invest in Venezuela?
Today, governments always support companies in their own countries, big companies like Chevron. So even to get contracts, even to advance their national interests, they will use the private sector. So it is not only the United States, France, and also many other countries want their private sector to succeed, because that will determine economic prosperity for their own countries. Certainly, Chevron will operate with the blessings of Trump and also advance US interests.
What do you think is coming next from Russia? How does it affect Russia and its supply of oil and gas?
Russia needs foreign exchange. Russia is one of the largest oil producers in the world. And of course, most recently, we have seen that Russian ships have been attacked. Russia has something called the ghost fleet that transports oil from Russia to many countries, including China, including to India. And of course, Trump do not want that. Trump wants to, in many ways, discipline Russia because of Russian campaign in Ukraine. So Trump is using the Russian oil distribution to disrupt it as a national security strategy of the United States. And most recently, we saw even the Ukrainian intelligence service. They targeted the Russian vessels. They targeted two vessels that were going into Russian waters to transport Russian oil to clients and customers.
Ambassador, as far as the oil fields in Iraq are concerned and the Chevron's ongoing talks, what do you think this suggests about Iraq and US relations? Because earlier it was an Iraq state company that had to take over the oil field. Professor Gunratna?
Oh yes.
Sorry,
So
sorry, that question was for you.
what we are seeing is that Iraq, the Americans have invested a lot in Iraq, and America wants to get some revenue back from that investment. So certainly, America is very keen for American firms to participate in the oil trade in Iraq. Iraq, as you know, is one of the richest areas for the production of oil. So U.S. Under Trump administration has negotiated for Chevron and other companies to invest significantly in the oil production and also in the oil distribution.
All right, thanks very much, Professor, for your assessment of the situation here. Do stay on with me. Viewers, let's also tell you that the Syrian army has now announced it will suspend all military activities in Aleppo's Sheikh Maqsoud district starting at 3 p.m. local time. This comes amid escalating violence between Syrian government forces and Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces in the area. Kurdish forces have accused Syrian troops of receiving support from Turkish drones during their attacks in the region. The Syrian army claimed it had completed a security sweep of the area, signaling that it had seized control of Sheikh Maqsoud by force after the failed ceasefire. This violent escalation is deepening one of Syria's primary fault lines, with Kurdish forces resisting President Bashar al-Assad's government and its control over the country. US and other world powers had welcomed the ceasefire earlier in the week, but Kurdish forces refused to leave the area, marking the latest chapter in Syria's ongoing conflict. Some of the civilians of Aleppo have spoken out. Let's hear them.
سألت عيلتي عن الضرب، قال ما احسن ننام، ضرب وكذا وهيك، حتى في ناس كانت على القصد حتطلع تضرب ما بيعرفوا مين، والحمد لله رب العالمين.
يعني انا بس بدي اروح عند اولادي اشوف اولادي، انا ما بدي شيء، انا بس بدي اولادي، ما بدي لا بيت ولا بدي سيارات ولا بدي شيء. انا اولادي ثلاثه صغار، انا عرفتهم عند الجاره وعم بحكي مع الجاره ما عم بترد علي، بس بتامل اروح انا عند اولادي، ما بدي شيء من الدنيا تطول.
All right, I request Professor Rohan Gunratna to join me in this discussion here. Professor, what does this talk about?
So Syria,
the role of US here, you know, because the US has always long supported Kurds and also has backed Bashar al-Assad's regime. Now, when these two parties that are both backed by US are conflicting, what role is the US to play, and how can it strike that balance it's required of?
so US is supporting the regime of Ahmad al-Shara, alias Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. President Trump met the Syrian leader both in Saudi Arabia and also in the United States. He invited him to the White House. So what we are seeing today is that Trump has given a very clear warning to the new Syrian leader, that is Ahmad al-Shara, to be very careful and cautious in dealing with the other minorities in Syria. So the current Syrian regime, they have attacked the Druze, they have attacked the Christians, they have attacked the Alawites, or what is called the Shiites, and now in the last 72 hours they have attacked the Kurds. So the US is very keen that Ahmad al-Shara doesn't do that. Ahmad al-Shara's own background is he was a former leader of ISIS, or the Islamic State, the terrorist group that governed the parts of Syria.
Yeah.
And later he formed a group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham,
Yeah.
which is also a jihadist group. So what is happening at this point is that Ahmad al-Shara is promoting Sharia Islam, or what you call Islamic law. And wherever Islamic law has been implemented, whether it is by the Taliban in Afghanistan or anywhere else, the other minorities live in tremendous fear. So what is important for the United States and for the other Western countries and other sensible countries and other far-reaching leaders to tell Ahmad al-Shara not to implement this Sharia law, and also to give the minorities of Syria sufficient autonomy so that the Druze, the Shiites or the Alawites, and the Kurds and the Christians can live in peace and harmony with the Muslims. But if Ahmad al-Shara is having the mindset of a Islamist or mindset of a jihadist, then Syria will never become a prosperous nation. It will be in constant turmoil and war. So I think that this is the right time for the world to evaluate or re-evaluate Ahmad al-Shara, the new Syrian leader, and to give him a very clear message to treat the minorities with respect. And in fact, every country should be judged by the way they treat their minority communities.
Yeah, sure. But would you say this is a problem that's largely been created by the US?
This is a problem that Ahmad al-Shara has created, and the Kurds are very important, as you mentioned. The Kurds fought against ISIS. The Kurds played the most important role to defeat ISIS or the Islamic State in 2019, January, February, and March in Syria, in the Euphrates region. And the final battle was fought by the Kurds in a very effective way. And Kurds are also holding on to the ISIS prisoners. So the Kurds must be protected. There must be no pressure on the Kurds, no pressure on the Druze, no pressure on the Alawites, and no pressure on the Christians by Ahmad al-Shara or the Syrian government.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining me in this discussion for now. Moving ahead, viewers, let's tell you that clashes have been reported in southwest France as police moved in to clear a fuel depot blockade set up by protesting farmers near Bordeaux in France. Gendarmes were confronted by members of the Coordination Rural Union as the site was reopened after days of disruption. However, the protests have been linked to growing anger over the European Union-Mercosur trade deal. At the same time, several thousand Irish farmers have taken part in large demonstrations, including tractor protests opposing the agreement. Farmers fear cheaper agricultural imports from South America could undercut local producers. Despite opposition from France and Ireland, the deal has been approved by European Union states and now awaits a vote in the European Parliament. And like always, we have some technology news for you before we wrap up the bulletin. Let's tell you that the US Supreme Court is taking up a major corporate liability case. Justices have agreed to hear an appeal from Cisco Systems backed by the Trump administration. At issue is whether a centuries-old US law can be used to hold American companies liable for human rights abuses committed overseas. The case stems from a lawsuit filed by members of China's Falun Gong movement. They accuse Cisco of knowingly providing technology used by Beijing to track, detain, and torture practitioners. Cisco strongly denies the claims. The company says its sales to China were legal under US trade policy. A federal appeals court revived the case in 2023, saying Cisco may have aided abuses. Now, the Supreme Court will decide whether that ruling went too far. A decision is expected by late June. And that's all we have time for. Thank you for watching NewsX World. For all international news and updates, stay tuned.